What's going on, everybody? Welcome into this episode of The Breakdown. I am your host, Danny Marang, and today we're going to take a look at 5 possible free agent bigs for the Portland Trail Blazers. Now, these are guys that are going to be vet min, BAE, taxpayer mid-level. This is not full mid-level and above cap space, guys. It's not the best possible big man additions that the Portland Trail Blazers can add. It's the realistic guys. So before you get mad and angry in the comments, just remember, keep that in mind. It's not the best. It's the most likely or the ones that can kind of patch up the holes. This is your backup big man. This is your second, your third, and maybe even fourth big man. So don't get mad. Just take it with a grain of salt. And with all that in mind, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, and thank you to everybody else who already has. The support has been absolutely tremendous, and I couldn't thank you guys all enough. Thank you so much. Without further ado, let's get into it, all right? All right, so number one on the list right now is going to be Cody Zeller. And before anybody gets too worked up, it's not a sexy name. It's not a pretty name. It's not like this fantastic addition. It's just a solid addition. You're probably going to be able to land him for around a vet min. If it's not vet min, it's probably half of BAE. He's not going to command a ton of money on the open market. That's just the reality. But he is a true 7-footer. He does finish around the rim. He's a good screen setter. He's got a high basketball IQ. He's doesn't have a very high ceiling, but he's got a higher floor than a lot of other guys. And I think one thing, if you can take away from the NBA Finals and the playoffs, is you want some guys that you're not terrified to put on the floor. I'm not excited to put Cody Zeller on the floor, but putting him out there, you're not, especially coming off the bench, you're not terrified. You look at the Jeff Teague minutes for the Bucks or the Kaminsky minutes for the Suns, and you're sitting like, could we find something else? Hell, you're doing that with Enes Kanter and Carmelo Anthony. So you're trying to find ways to improve that on bargain deals. I think Cody Zeller can do that. Again, he has size. He moves his feet well enough. He's not a plotter. You're not going to throw the ball into him like you would in a Kanter, so you're losing that offensive value, but you're getting legitimate size. You're getting real rim deterrence. And he is a plus finisher around the rim. If you get him the ball on a drive and dump or on a good roll action, then you can utilize him. This is one of those instances where if the Blazers are going to fill out offensive spots up and down the roster for the bench unit, you can afford to have one non-shooter in this role. And this is kind of where it splits hairs depending on what Derek Jones Jr. decides and where they stick him in the lineup. But Zeller is an okay spot. That's something you're not going to write home about, but again, that's not what this is about. This is about filling out a roster that needs a lot of work. And I think Cody Zeller, at bare minimum, is somebody you can trust in that regard. Speaking of guys you can trust, here at number 2, 31-year-old Dewayne Dedmon, another 7-footer, good size, good reach, works as a rim deterrent. He's had this era in his career already where he started to shoot more threes, and it looked like he was capable of doing it, but I don't know if it was changing teams, and he had a period where he was with the Kings where he was really trying to force his way out. Maybe just wasn't comfortable. Maybe teams that he was kind of hopping back and forth and not feeling comfortable, he wasn't able to get into that shooting groove. But I also think at worst, he's a slightly better three-point option and kind of a spread offense than Jusuf Nurkic. And I think that's probably a good place to start. He's a legit 7-footer. Defensively, he's probably lost a step, but I think he's got natural instincts as far as at least being a solid rim deterrent. He's not a guy who's going to chase a ton of blocks for you, as we'll get to some other guys here who can do that. But I think in most respects, again, solid. And that's what the Blazers need to take a look at. Getting size, getting solid guys that can give you a couple different things. He's solid around the rim as a finisher. He's solid as a shooter. He's solid as a roll man. You can maybe even put him in some pick and pop actions, which gives you a little bit of versatility within your offense. And defensively, maybe you can push him a little bit above the free throw line without being terrified. And again, the bar we're trying to set is you want to have as many guys on the floor and in your rotation as humanly possible that you're not scared to death of putting out there. And I think Dewayne Dedmon, for a vet minimum, flies above that. And if you're getting guys at vet minimum deals who you're not terrified to play, that's a big-time key in having a successful team, not only during the regular season, but having a deeper rotation in the playoffs where you're not having to play guys, the heavy loads where you're just worried. Please, for the love of God, don't lose this section of minutes that the starters are on the floor. They may even win you some. And that's the difference between good teams and great teams. And it's something the Blazers have lacked for a long time. So Dewayne Dedmon's another guy I think you can slot in there. You could probably get him again for vet minimum money, and maybe a little bit more. I doubt it, but that's the kind of the market. That's why the big man market is what it is. You either have the top end, a couple middle guys, and then everybody else down below, and that's where you can make real value. So again, Dewayne Dedmon's another good guy to have on this list who's very solid. Coming in at number 3, Nerlens Noel. Noel's the first guy on this list that really has those siloed abilities that I've talked about in the past. If you're going to look at it in a bar chart, or if you're a big 2K fan, you're cranking the sliders all the way up on a couple things, but it's going to cost you pretty heavily in some other areas. Nerlens Noel is a fantastic rim protector and shot blocker. There's no doubt about that. He's got preternatural instincts as far as when it relates to sending people's shots away. Fantastic at it. One hand, two hand, right hand, left hand, from the weak side, ball side. He's just good at it. He's got that ability. It's a lot like an Enes Kanter offensive rebounder. He's just got that in his blood. He also is a really poor shooter. He can't create for himself. He can't put the ball down. He can't create for others. But he's also an incredibly athletic rim running finisher. He's not going to do anything with the ball 10 feet away from the rim. But you get him a lob, he'll finish it. You get him the ball on a little dump pass after a guard or a wing draws 2, he'll finish it. So this is the first time I think you really have to decide what kind of player do you want backing up Jusuf Nurkic. Do you want somebody big like him so you have the same kind of coverages, or do you want a little bit of versatility? Because in this respect, Nerlens can get out and cover above the free throw line. You can use him in aggressive defensive coverages. He can switch. You're not terrified of him being outside the paint. His natural inclination is to drop back in and cover because he is a shot blocker. But because of his length, he's a legit 7-footer. He's got a 9-foot plus standing reach. He's the kind of guy who can stand there and quite literally just nearly grab the rim without jumping. It's truly insane. But with all that being said, you are giving some things up on the other side. No matter what the Trailblazers do with their roster, whether CJ's here or not, whether Norm resigns, whether Derek Jones Jr. opts in or opts in and gets traded, the Blazers do need to figure out what they're going to do at that backup center position. They need to decide whether they want to have a defensive specialist, if they want somebody who's just kind of veteran big. Those are the Cody Zellers and the Dewayne Dedmons of the world. Or, as we'll get to here in a little bit, somebody a little bit more offensive focused because you want to try to grow leads with your bench unit as opposed to just stymie them. That limits your defensive versatility and variability, but those are decisions you have to make. With Nerlens, it's a no-doubter. He is going to be your anchor for your defensive unit. He can get out there and eat up real minutes if, say, Jusuf Nurkic gets nicked up again. Hell, you could actually roll Nerlens Noel as a starter, and you wouldn't have to worry about a ton as far as the defensive impact. Offensively, different question. But again, if you're talking about all these guys on this list, you're taxpayer mid-level and down. And in that regard, the Blazers are in a position where there's a lot of different guys out there that can help them, Nerlens being probably the premier guy on the defensive side of the ball. At number 4, we're going to go with Kelly OLYNYK. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not sure the Blazers had the financial means to sign OLYNYK. The taxpayer mid-level might not be enough. If you look at John Hollinger's boards ratings, doesn't look like that's going to be enough. Why? Well, Kelly OLYNYK got moved to the Rockets and had career highs across the board. 19 points, 8 rebounds, plus playmaking ability, career highs in steals. It's a caveat of only 27 games, but he also had a 62% effective shooting percentage. He was incredible. They put him in as a point forward, point center, whatever you want to call it, and he was running their offense at times. Now, if you're the Portland Trailblazers, and you're in a situation where you don't know what's going on with Damian Lillard, you don't know what's going on with CJ McCollum or Norman Powell, you're not sure how your second unit is going to be broken up, you can alleviate some of that playmaking pressure by signing a Kelly OLYNYK. Why? Because, again, you can run your offense through him. If you're not able to sign a real floor general type to run your offense, well, have Kelly run it and then have some additional creation aspects up and down the lineup that you can stagger. OLYNYK is a plus shooter from all levels. He can attack closeouts. You can get him the ball above the break and have him run your offense. You can put him on the block and actually have him go into the post and go to work. You can run him through some horns actions. You can put him on the elbow and kind of mini Jokic him, that's a hell of a boon for a team. For the Portland Trailblazers, it would allow them to go super big. They could run OLYNYK at the 4, Nurkic at the 5, throw some plus defenders out there and try to figure it out and really punish some teams. You could go smaller and have him obviously at the 5 and then fill up behind him. If Derrick Jones Jr. opts in, you've got some defensive coverage. You could have a Jones, Covington, OLYNYK lineup where you've got good size and you've got decent mobility and you've got 4 shooters and a hard-time slasher. I like that. There are some defensive deficiencies, mostly because OLYNYK's not the most fleet of foot. He is a legit 7-footer, so that does help, at least with some rim protection. He's still not great in that regard, but he's smart enough and heady enough to put himself in decent positions. You don't really want him getting caught on switches. You don't really want him defending in space. But again, we're talking about bench guys, and we're not talking about guys who are playing 30-plus minutes a night, or somebody you count on a ton for their impact defensively. You're just trying to win those minutes. And I think OLYNYK, with his offensive prowess being so great, is somebody who could definitely win you some minutes. And that's a big step forward for the Portland Trailblazers. At number 5, Mr. Bobby Portis, NBA champion Bobby Portis. It's got to be pretty cool for him to be able to say that. But listen, he came off the bench to the Bucks, and he was instrumental in them being able to secure their first title in 50 years. If you're looking for that guy, he's an attitude guy, an intangible guy, a hard worker, and beloved by his teammates. I know people that have covered him and just they sing his praises. I think from a off the court or non-basketball related part of all of this, he's the one that really tends to stand out in this group. He brings guys together, and I think that matters. I think the Blazers have been missing some of that. I think you saw that show its ugly head in the Denver series, if I'm being totally honest. But he also is a pretty solid basketball player. He shows up in big games. He knocks down threes. His shooting ability this year was out of this world. Just shot the cover off the ball. Defensively, he's not great, but I don't think you're terrified, again, of having him out there. That's a common thread. You're not terrified of having it. This is what having years of Enes Kanter and Carmelo Anthony will do to somebody. Just give me somebody who's not going to just scare the living death out of me when they're out there on the floor. And I think Bobby Portis can do that. Clearly, he was on the floor in serious minutes in a game-clinching, series-clinching, finals-clinching game. It's a big deal. So Portis, mobility, pretty decent defensively. Another one of those guys where they seem to move a little bit better with the ball in their hands. I think OLYNYK and Portis both fall in that regard. They're heavy-footed defensively, which, to be honest, so is Kanter. But I don't think it's quite to the same degree. Again, he can shoot the ball. You can use him as a rim runner. You can put him in a pick and roll, pick and pop. He can just kind of duck off onto it into the elbow. He can slide in the corners, knock down threes. And again, that attitude. I think those are things that the Trailblazers need desperately. Playmaking-wise, you can't run anything through him. But he can make simple passes on time. And I think that's an improvement. Again, this sounds like I'm throwing Kanter under the bus because he's one of those siloed players. He does a couple things really well and struggles in other areas. But the lack of playmaking or making a pass on time consistently throughout his time in Portland is one of those things that has always driven me crazy. I think Portis gets just a step above that and makes plays and passes on time enough to be effective in that regard. Now, as good as these guys are for the Trailblazers, the improvements, I think every one of these guys honestly has the ability to be improvement over the backup front court the Blazers have been running out for the last couple years. There is still one more guy to add to this. That's Blake Griffin. Let's not forget Blake Griffin has direct ties to Neil Olshey, Mr. Clipper himself. There is, when you start connecting the dots and connecting the lines, there's a pecking order to which Neil Olshey always gets his man, so to speak. Anytime somebody has been linked to them previously in a report, Neil seems to find a way to want to bring them back, whether it's Pau Gasol, eventually swinging around to Chandler Parsons in the 2016 season. It just seems to happen over and over again. Chauncey Billups, the new head coach, obviously another guy that Neil brought in as a player back in 2011 with the Clippers. So you take a look at that, and Blake Griffin, listen, I don't know what getting out of Detroit did for him, but it did some things. Let's not get it twisted. And he looked like he was reborn in Brooklyn. Does he want to try to run it back and ring chase with the Nets, or does he want to come to Portland and play for his buddy Neil? I don't know, but I'll tell you this: he's the probably less mobile, less reliable from a health standpoint version of Kelly Olynyk. He's a plus playmaker. He's added that jumper to his arsenal. He's maybe a little bit headier and a little bit more aggressive offensively than Olynyk. Maybe has a smarter vision when playing. But I think he's very much in the same vein. And if he checks out healthy and he wants to come to Portland, I think that's something you, as the Trailblazers, you have to take a look at that. As much as we've memed and joked about Blake Griffin and how he suddenly got healthy once he got out of Detroit, the Blazers would be fools to look that gift horse in the mouth, because he could do an awful lot for them that they currently don't have on the roster. So there you go. There's your 5 plus your 1 bonus Neil Olshey special and Blake Griffin. Bigs that the Portland Trailblazers could look at that could meet that taxpayer mid-level exception or less, that BAE, vet min, however you want to slice it up, for the Portland Trailblazers in this offseason. And the key thing to remember is, regardless of who, what, when, where that backcourt looks like, whether CJ's here, Norm's here, they're both gone, they do need to figure out what exactly they're doing on the back end of that rotation, on the backside of the defense. They just don't have anybody. Zach Collins is likely done. Enes Kanter, after what we saw, I don't know how you can bring him back. Carmelo Anthony, listen, I know a lot of people like that ride. I didn't. I want to get off that ride. I don't think they should bring him back. So they need to focus on bigs that give you things that those two guys did together. And I think that if you're looking at Blake Griffin, Kelly Olynyk, they could give you Carmelo Anthony, Enes Kanter in one. I think that's the key, because then you can put another player on the floor that can cover up for the sins of the other. You're not just shoehorned into playing a singular particular style. So, as always, thank you all so very much. I appreciate it. Like, rate, review, subscribe, whether you're watching on YouTube, whether you're downloading podcast versions, whatever. I appreciate the support so very much. And until next time, take care. Bye.